Hello, welcome back everyone. Before we begin, here is a quick explanation. Adolf Hitler was the dictator of Nazi Germany from 1933 to 1945. He started World War II, caused the deaths of millions, and led one of the darkest times in human history. We are not telling this story to support him. We are not telling it to criticize him either. This video is only for educational purposes, to help you learn from history, to help you practice English, and to understand what really happened in his final 24 hours. If you want to know his full life story, you can watch his complete biography on this channel. But today, we focus on the last day, the end of everything, told like a movie, but based on real history. Welcome to the final day of a man the world will never forget. This is not a political video. This is not about supporting or attacking anyone. This is about a moment in time. The last 24 hours of Adolf Hitler, a man who once stood before millions, now standing alone in silence. A man who once commanded great armies now sat underground, waiting to die. And today, we will walk through those final hours with you. We will enter the bunker. We will feel the walls shake from bombs above. And yes, this video is also perfect for English listening practice. It was April 29, 1945. Berlin was falling apart. The Soviet army was only a few streets away. The sound of bombs echoed across the city day and night. Deep below the ground, under the chancellery, there was a secret place, Hitler's bunker. It was cold, dark, and made of thick concrete. The air smelled of smoke and fear. Inside, people whispered instead of talking. Everyone knew the war was over. Hitler was 56 years old. He looked weak and tired. His hands shook when he held a pen or a cup. He almost never went outside the bunker anymore. He spent his time reading old reports and moving flags on a map, pretending his armies still existed. But he knew the truth. Germany was defeated. The empire he built was collapsing. That night, something strange happened. Even as bombs exploded above, Hitler decided to get married. He married Eva Braun, the woman who had stayed by his side for many years. Eva was 33 years old. She was cheerful, loyal, and deeply in love with him. Many people had told her to escape, but she refused. She said she wanted to die with him rather than live without him. The marriage ceremony took place in a small, dark room inside the bunker. There were only a few people present, close staff members and 2 witnesses. A civil officer came to read the legal words. It lasted only 10 minutes. After signing the papers, Eva smiled softly. Hitler looked calm, maybe for the first time in days. Outside, the bombs kept falling. Inside, people tried to act normal, but no one could forget what was coming. After the wedding, there was a small dinner. It was simple, some pasta, potatoes, and a bit of champagne. They tried to celebrate like it was a normal night. Eva wore a light blue dress and laughed quietly. She tried to bring happiness to the dark bunker. Hitler talked a little with his secretaries and officers. He thanked them for their service. Some of them cried. Others just looked down at the floor. They all knew this was their last meal together. Outside, explosions continued to shake the bunker walls. The sound was like thunder. At midnight, the celebration ended. People went to their rooms, each lost in their own thoughts. They could hear bombs and gunfire above. The world around them was ending. After everyone left, Hitler called his personal staff again. He gave a few last orders: to destroy all important papers, to burn his personal belongings, and to make sure his body would not be captured by the enemy. He said quietly that he would not leave Berlin. He would not allow himself to be taken alive. He wanted to die there, in the capital, surrounded by the ruins of his empire. His words were calm, but his voice was weak. Even his loyal officers could see that he was no longer the same man. The war had broken him completely. He spent the rest of the night with Eva. They talked softly, sometimes holding hands. No one knows exactly what they said, but they both seemed strangely peaceful. As the night passed, the bombing continued without rest. At around 4 a.m., reports came in that Soviet troops were just 1 block away. Hitler didn't react. He just sat there, staring at the map on the table. Eva brought him tea. He looked at her and nodded, saying nothing. The room was silent except for the distant explosions. Outside, Berlin was burning. Inside the bunker, time was running out. In just a few hours, Adolf Hitler's story would come to its end. It was early morning in Berlin. The city was silent for a moment, covered in smoke and fire. Then the sound of bombs returned again, deep, heavy, and endless. The last day of Adolf Hitler's life had begun. Inside the bunker, the air was thick. People moved slowly, tired and afraid. There was no sunlight, only yellow lamps that made everything look pale. Hitler's staff whispered quietly, avoiding eye contact. They all knew this was the end. Hitler woke up around 9 a.m. He looked weaker than ever. His face was pale, his eyes dark and empty. He had not slept much. Eva Braun was with him, calm and quiet. He asked for breakfast, some bread and tea. He didn't eat much. While eating, he listened to reports from the front lines. The Soviet troops were now only a few hundred meters away. Hitler nodded slowly. He said nothing. He just stared at the table, lost in thought. By 10 a.m., everyone in the bunker knew that the battle for Berlin was over. The German soldiers outside were either captured or dead. There was no army left to defend the city. Hitler sat at a long wooden table with his generals. He listened as they explained the situation. He didn't shout. He didn't blame anyone. He simply accepted it. He spoke quietly, saying the war was lost. Then, he told them he had made his decision. He would take his own life before the enemy arrived. The generals were silent. Some cried, others just stared at the floor. No one tried to stop him. They all knew it was impossible to escape. Around 11 a.m., Hitler called his secretaries. He said he wanted to write his last will and political statement. He sat at a desk, his hands shaking as he wrote. He blamed others for the failure of the war, his generals, his enemies, even his own people. But behind those words, it was clear he had lost everything. He also wrote that he would not leave Berlin and that his body should be burned after his death. He didn't want the enemy to use it as a symbol. When he finished writing, he signed the papers with a weak hand. His face looked tired, but strangely calm. After that, he called in some of his most loyal staff. He thanked them for their loyalty and gave each of them a firm handshake. He told them they were free to leave if they wanted to save themselves. Around 2 p.m., Hitler had his final meal. It was simple, vegetarian pasta and a little soup. Eva sat next to him, smiling softly, trying to act normal. They didn't talk much. Sometimes they looked at each other, but both knew what was coming. After lunch, they said goodbye to their staff. Some of them hugged Eva. Some saluted Hitler one last time. Many people were crying. Hitler shook hands with his guards and told them to be loyal to Germany until the end. Then he and Eva walked back to their private room. At around 3:30 in the afternoon, the time had come. Hitler asked everyone to leave him and Eva alone. Only 2 people, his personal staff, stayed outside the room to wait. Inside, the 2 sat together on a small sofa. Eva took a cyanide capsule, poison, and died within seconds. Hitler then took poison himself and shot himself with a pistol. The people outside heard a short, sharp sound. Then, silence. They waited for a moment, then opened the door. Hitler was sitting on the sofa, his head tilted, his pistol on the floor. Eva was next to him, peaceful and still. The smell of gunpowder filled the room. No one spoke. No one moved. It was over. Following Hitler's orders, his guards wrapped both bodies in blankets, carried them upstairs to the garden, and poured gasoline over them. They set the bodies on fire. Flames rose high, mixing with smoke and dust from the burning city. Above ground, Berlin was dying. Below ground, the man who started it all was gone. The world's darkest chapter had reached its final page. The sound of the gun was short, and then silence. Inside the bunker, time seemed to stop. No one spoke for several minutes. The people standing outside the room knew what had just happened, but they were afraid to open the door. Finally, one of Hitler's guards entered. He looked at the bodies, then slowly turned to the others and said quietly, "It's over." For a few moments, nobody moved. Then they all began to follow Hitler's final orders. They wrapped the bodies of Hitler and Eva Braun in gray army blankets. Two soldiers carried them up the stairs, step by step, into the Chancellery garden. Outside, the air was filled with smoke, fire, and dust. Bombs were still exploding in the distance. They placed the bodies on the ground, poured gasoline over them, and set them on fire. Flames rose high in the air. The man who had brought so much destruction was now turning to ashes. It was April 30th, 1945, around 3:30 in the afternoon. The war was not yet officially over, but its end had already begun. After the fire, the guards returned underground. The people in the bunker were silent. Some cried quietly, others sat and stared at the walls. Everyone knew the war was lost, and now their leader was gone. Some tried to make plans to escape Berlin. Others decided to stay and wait for the Soviet army. They could hear tanks and gunfire above them. Every minute, the sound came closer. In the evening, German officers tried to contact the Soviet soldiers to discuss surrender. But communication was difficult. The city was chaos. Fires were everywhere, and the streets were full of ruins. Down below, the atmosphere inside the bunker was heavy and hopeless. People whispered prayers, packed their few belongings, or just sat in silence. They had lived for years under Hitler's rule, and now that he was gone, no one knew what to do next. The next day, on May 1st, Joseph Goebbels, one of Hitler's closest followers, also took his own life, together with his wife. They even gave poison to their children. It was a dark and tragic end for all of them. A few days later, on May 2nd, the Soviet army completely captured Berlin. German soldiers in the city surrendered. The red flag of the Soviet Union was raised above the Reichstag building, a sign that Nazi Germany was finished. And on May 8th, 1945, Germany officially surrendered to the Allies. World War II in Europe was finally over. Millions of people were dead. Cities were destroyed. Families were broken. But the world had survived one of its darkest moments. From that day forward, humanity began to rebuild, not just buildings, but hearts, minds, and hopes. After the war, the truth about Nazi Germany became clear. Millions of innocent people had been killed, men, women, and children. The world promised that such horror must never happen again. New organizations were created to protect peace and human rights, like the United Nations. Countries came together to rebuild a new world, one built not on hate, but on cooperation and understanding. Adolf Hitler was gone, but the lessons from his rule remained forever. History remembered him, not as a hero, not as a genius, but as a warning about what happens when hate, pride, and power control the human heart. The last 24 hours of Adolf Hitler were not about victory or strength. They were about fear, loneliness, and the collapse of everything he had built. He began his life with dreams of greatness, but ended it in silence, trapped underground, surrounded by the sound of destruction. The same walls that once protected him became his final prison. It reminds us all that no matter how powerful someone becomes, hate and violence always destroy from within. True strength comes from kindness, peace, and understanding, not from control or fear. Thank you for watching and practicing your English with this story. Through this lesson, you didn't just improve your English. You also learned a real part of human history. If you found this story helpful and interesting, please give it a like, share it with your friends, and subscribe to the channel for more English learning videos based on true stories in history. Remember, every story, even a dark one, can teach us something about life. So keep learning, keep growing, and keep your mind open. See you in the next story.